All right. Let's just wait to see if everyone's in. Cool. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this chat. If you want to and can, feel free to put on your camera because this is going to be very informal and it's nice to see people's faces, but if you don't feel pressured for it in any case. I'll be welcoming some more people in shortly, but I want to get started. I'm Isabel. I'm the founder of I Like Networking, which is a platform for women and non-binary people in the creative industries. We support people progress or enter their career in that sector through a free mentorship scheme, which will open again this year in March. We have a community, so it's a paid community, but we also offer bursaries. And we also have a series of online events like this one, short courses, newsletter, digital resources, and a podcast. So the whole shebang. And I'm very excited to have Albert here from Underpinned. They are our 2021 sponsors, which is also very exciting, and an amazing tool for anyone who is a freelancer. I've been a freelancer most of my life, entrepreneur, solopreneur, however you called it, at different times of my life as well. So I think, considering what's happening with the world, this seems like a topical discussion to have at this point. I also just want to know that we are all about networking and connections. So please do feel free to pop in your LinkedIn, your Instagram, whatever it is. And I actually do encourage you all to select one person, it can be random, from the conversation today and go say hi to them on social media and start making new connections basically today. So with that said, Albert, please come on board and introduce yourself.
Hello. Yeah, definitely chuck stuff in the chat. And actually it'd be really cool to know what kinds of freelancers you are, or what kinds of careers you're doing, or what kinds of professions you're in. If you just want to type in like your name, what you do, maybe any links to key social media, it's always really interesting to hear and kind of be able to discuss and make it a bit more relevant. First to say thank you massively to Isabel. I Like Networking. I don't actually remember how we were originally introduced, but ever since we had our first conversation, how were we originally introduced?
I don't remember. I think it was through Emily, actually.
Okay, through one of my team.
Yeah, from your team. Yeah.
But ever since we've been introduced, all the work that Isabel and I Like Networking do is fucking fantastic, and I couldn't recommend them more highly. And it's been an absolute pleasure to work with them and to support you guys in loads of different ways. And it's very exciting to be your sponsor for 2021. So I'm not going to bore you with loads of background of who I am and what I do, but I'll give you a little bit of insight. I'd like this to be a conversation. I'm happy to move over and show people things if we want to make it a bit more of a presentation. But I think, especially as with this kind of number of people, the best way to get the most out of it is to just ask as many questions as humanly possible and get a discussion going. And if you want to ask that via microphone or via chat, that's more than okay. But I'll start with a little bit about who I am and why I'm the person that's talking about how to launch a freelance career. And this particular topic of the first 100 days, I think that the first 100 days of your freelance career can either be like hair-pulling horror show of stress, anxiety, and cluelessness, or it could be like a constructive program to building towards a career that you want. I think that, to be honest, for most people, it is the former. But hopefully, even if we just do it via discussion, we can get an idea of what it would look like to build a really successful freelance career. What are the first steps are that you need to take to do that really effectively? So my name is Albert de Simmons, as is Clausen. It's a bit of a mouthful. I am the CEO and co-founder of Underpinned. Underpinned is basically a platform that helps you build your whole freelance career in one place. We have proposals, portfolios, you can find clients, manage your work, do invoicing, contracts, education. I'll get into a bit more of it later as we talk about what you need to do. But the reason that I do this, and the reason that I am kind of passionate about freelancing, solopreneuring, small business ownering, whatever you call yourself or however you define yourself, is that I started off my career as a ballet dancer at the Royal Ballet School, and then decided that I didn't want to do ballet anymore, and I went and studied philosophy of science at university, and then I decided I didn't want to do philosophy of science anymore, and I went into business strategy consultancy and public relations consultancy. And everyone was like, oh, that's really weird. Underpinned, you went from like this super creative thing to like this super businessy thing. And I think the reason is that I was always passionate about the creative industries. And I was always passionate about creative problem solving. Like, how do we make better businesses? How do we make more passionate businesses? How do we make people, how do we get people to be doing what they love? And so I was always kind of boring, analytical business problem solver in a creative room. And that's what I was really passionate about. And I launched an arts charity and an arts business that was all about helping young emerging artists while I was consulting businesses in the creative sector, the science sector, and tech sector. And as I was doing all this, I worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of freelancers, even before I started Underpinned. And I didn't really call them freelancers at the time. It was mostly kind of creatives, or I prefer to say creative problem solvers, because a lot of them were not necessarily in creative sectors. They might have been consultants or even accountants. But the thing that was really interesting to me is that there were all these people who were ultimately very, very good at what they did, if not amazing at what they did. Like, they had these crafts that they were passionate about, but there was just no understanding of how to build a successful freelance career. And it was just this problem that everybody had exactly the same set of hurdles that they just couldn't surmount when they first got started. And I imagine that you all felt this. I definitely felt this when I started my freelance career, which was just like, where the heck do I find clients? Like, who am I looking for, and how am I approaching them? Like, how am I pitching myself? How am I managing and organizing my business? And all the tools and services that I was looking at, they always seemed to be geared towards like bigger businesses, and that they weren't really geared towards me as a freelancer. They always did like a small part of what I needed to do and a load of stuff that I didn't need. So Underpinned was basically founded on this idea that there were all of these people who wanted to build businesses that they were passionate about, but there was very little access of how to do that. And so Underpinned was basically founded on three core things, which are education, community, and infrastructure. Education, fairly self-explanatory. Like, we produce loads and loads of educational content through our magazine. We now have an ultimate guide to freelancing, which is kind of like it's a 5-week course. And the first one launches on the 1st of February. And it's absolutely everything you need to know to start building a really successful foundation for a freelance business. And then it goes on to talk about how you then build out that freelance business over the first kind of year or two. And I teach that course, and it's got PDFs and videos and worksheets and community stuff and a live workshop for each module. And I'll talk a bit about it later. Then we have community, which is really important. Like, one of the biggest problems when you're starting freelancing is just talking to people. And I think what Isabel says, it sounds kind of facile, but it's actually so important. Like, just pick someone randomly from this list of people and just say hello. Send them a message on LinkedIn, send them a message on Facebook, because if there's one thing that I've learned about freelancing, it's that ultimately your worth is built out of your network. And I did this huge piece of research on how to be a successful freelancer. This guide, the Ultimate Guide to Freelancing, was basically the summary of all this research I've been doing over about 3 years of how to build the ultimate freelance career. And we basically separated freelancers into 3 categories. Category 1 was people who were just getting started, who generally didn't have a huge understanding of how to build a freelance business, but had some like really clear skills that they just needed to monetize and learn how to do that. The category 2, which we call the fumble years, which is the first kind of 1 to 3 years of freelancing, where most people kind of fumble about a bit. There's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of asking your friends. There's a lot of kind of like throwing out messages, but not being 100% sure how to do it. And a lot of people struggle to kind of be financially stable as a freelancer in that period. And then we have established freelancers. And everybody wants to be an established freelancer. Everybody wants to get all of their income from freelancing, start building a successful freelance career. And so we spent ages looking at, and I'm talking, we looked at tens of thousands of people, like what made an established freelancer established. And one of the things that I found really interesting is we would take examples like graphic designers, and we would look at students or people who had just graduated from universities in graphic design, who were incredible designers. And we were looking at the equivalent of that person who was established 10 years down the line, making 150 grand a year. And we're like, what is the difference between those two people? How do we get the first person to act, behave, and look like the second person? And basically, it boiled down to like one really simple thing. The established freelancers had either an established network, an established professional network they got all their work from, or 2, they had a really, really good system for doing professional outreach. So they had like a pipeline system where usually we work on like a quarterly or monthly basis. They'd reach out to a certain number of people in a certain sector each month and each quarter, and that would be where they got their work from. So what we basically realized was the only difference between these 2 people, I mean, obviously the graphic designers, you gain experience, you get better at working with clients, but fundamentally the only difference was the ability to build good professional networks, which boiled down to how they communicated themselves. And this is kind of what we found in our course on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about today, which is like, what does that foundation look like? how do you effectively communicate? Now, the final part of Underpin is just the infrastructure piece, which is probably the most exciting from a technological point of view. But from a day-to-day management point of view, it's all the stuff that you want to spend less time on. I'm just going to turn off this heating. It's absolutely boiling. It's all the stuff you don't want to spend so much time doing, which is kind of project management, invoicing, contracts, making and designing your portfolios, trying to find clients, all the kind of stuff that you need to do to run a successful business. But ultimately, the less time you can spend on it, the kind of happier you are doing what you do. So yeah, that's kind of a context to it, and that's why we set up Underpin, and that's why I'm the person and doing this. And so that would be really useful is like throughout this, if you have any questions or you want to ask anything, please throw them in. This isn't going to be like a structured talk. I'm just kind of go through some interesting points, and I'm keen to hear your insight and hear your questions. If you're interested in a kind of more formal course, like as I said, we do this course, which I'm doing a workshop introduction to this week, which you can sign up to. And if you're interested in the course itself, get in touch with me directly after. And we have a discount for Israel and the I Like Networking people as well. So first 100 days of being a freelancer. Now, it's cool the first, I mean, we're talking about the topic of the first 100 days of being a freelancer, but to be honest, it doesn't really matter whether it's your first 100 days or your first 100 days of your 10th year. I think what I really want to talk about today and what I kind of want to get into is how to start operating and thinking of yourself like a business and how to do that really effectively. So if you start being a freelancer and let's say you've just finished a full-time job and you start being a freelancer as a copywriter, your first thought is, how do I become a really good copywriter for clients? And it's kind of the wrong way of thinking about it. If you take one thing out of your first 100 days of being a freelancer, it should be to stop thinking about your profession and start thinking about yourself as a business that does that thing. So rather than saying you're a copywriter, you're now a freelance business that does copywriting. And it sounds like a really silly and kind of like small change in the way that you think about yourself, but it is by far the most important. And if after 100 days of freelancing, you've achieved that one thing, you're way closer to being established and successful freelancer than almost anything else you can do as a freelance business. Now, what that actually means is a little bit more kind of complicated, but the truth is it's quite simple to start doing. And the way that I always describe it to people is literally starting to think about your service as a means to an end. When you work in a full-time job, you're usually thinking about your role as an end unto itself. You have a series of objectives, things that you have to achieve, and you're achieving them. Like that's what you do. You're told you have to design something, or you have to write something, or you have to build a strategy around something. So that's your whole task. You don't tend to be so worried about what that task is for. You don't tend to be so worried about why the business needs you to achieve a particular thing, because you're focused on your job. As a freelancer, it is the exact opposite. You're not working for somebody who is going to be giving you the task and they're not going to expect you to understand why you're doing it. As a freelancer, you have a much bigger responsibility to understand why you're doing the thing. And that's kind of why I say to almost put your profession to the side. And when we built Underpin, one of the questions we asked ourselves at the beginning was, should we focus on a very specific industry? Should we focus just on graphic designers, or just on journalists, or just on business strategy consultants? And eventually, after 6 months of debate, decided that we wouldn't focus on one industry. And it's a question I get asked a lot, particularly by investors who go, why are you not focusing on one industry? And the truth is very, very simple. There is absolutely no difference in how to build a successful freelance business, whether you're an accountant, coach, graphic designer, consultant, business strategy person, marketer, copywriter, web developer, UX designer. Like it really doesn't matter, which is a really important point to note, because your profession stops being important when you're trying to build a successful freelance career in building a good business. And so I think that if you take one thing out of how to structure your first 100 days, it should be, how do I build a business? Not how do I get better at being a graphic designer, or how do I get better at being a consultant? And one of the biggest flaws that I see a lot of freelancers fall into when they first start is doing loads of training and loads of refining of their skills. Now, the truth is, most people are really good at what they do. Like, I'm always shocked by the quality of work that we find in our community, even when they're just getting started. But the thing that really lacks is a clear way of communicating that to potential clients. I'm going to talk about Hannah Stevens. I'm going to talk about the finding clients thing in a second, because I think it's a really important point, and something that is really difficult for a lot of people. But yeah, so I think that this point on, like, I'm using lots of words and rambling a little bit, but the core point here is you need to start thinking about your freelance business as a business and move away from your profession. So in that first 100 days, you need to start thinking about, how do I move from thinking myself as a profession to thinking myself as a business? And this brings up kind of the second important thing, which is that if you imagine as a freelancer that you wear two hats, you wear the hat of your profession, which is different for everybody, and then you wear the hat of running your freelance business, or the meaning of running your freelance business. And when you're thinking about it in that sense, you can group all of these business building activities, these business building tasks into this one area, and then you have all of your profession tasks in the other area. And as I say, you're more likely to already understand and be good at your profession tasks. So you actually really want to be focusing on these business building tasks. So next tip is to basically write down 1 to 2 things. I mean, like, small, super achievable tasks a day. And this is something like, I built Underpinned and we've raised £2 million and we've done all of these amazing things. I still do this every single day with Underpinned. And the truth is, if you can improve like 0.5, 1% a day, like, just improve your pitch, just improve the way that you talk about yourself, just improve your client outreach, just 1% a day for 100 days, your business is 100% better in the third of a year. And that's a massive, massive improvement. So I think that people often, another thing I've noticed a lot is people tend to overwhelm themselves at the beginning with, I need to do everything all the time. Like, I need to be reaching out to clients and building my website, doing my Instagram, and And there's always going to be a million things that you can focus on. There's always going to be an unlimited number of tasks that you can do. And the truth is, as long as you do one thing today to make your business a bit better tomorrow, you're going to continuously improve. And it's really important that I say business and not profession. If you do one thing a day to make your profession better, you might be the best photographer in the whole world, but you might not have a single client. And I think that that's a really important thing to differentiate. You need to do 1, 2 things a day that are solely about building a better business. Now, looking at what kinds of things you need to do, generally speaking, I split it into kind of 3 categories or 4 categories. 1 is finding work, 2 is managing work, 3 is kind of getting paid and finances, and then 4 is kind of personality, persona, branding, and these kinds of things. And when we built the Underpinned course, I basically split it into those kinds of activities. Now, activity 1 is all about your proposition. The first thing you need to do to be a successful freelancer is understand what your proposition is. Now, the simplest way of describing what your proposition is to describe it as your problem solution. This is something that in the startup world, everybody talks about all the time. Like, anytime you go to talk to an investor, the first thing they want to know is, what is your problem solution? And it's really important as a freelancer, and it's not something you have to do very often as an employee. And what it basically boils down to is, if you're trying to pitch work to a client and you tell them what you're good at, then they have to find a reason to hire you. If you go to a client understanding the problem that they have and the solution that you have to their problem, the conversation becomes a lot simpler. Now, this comes back to using how you think about your profession. If you start thinking about yourself as a business, your profession becomes the tool you use to solve these problems for customers. Or for clients. So when you're talking to a client, you no longer say, I'm a graphic designer and I can do these services for you. You start to say, I can see how you have a problem engaging a millennial audience because your brand is not very colorful or engaging, and people are used to so much vibrancy on social media. So your problem is that you don't have enough engaging content on your platform to engage the audience that you're looking for. Now, it happens to be that I have exactly the solution for that problem, because I create pop art engaging illustrations which will absolutely resonate with your audience. Now, the subject of your proposition is about the client, not about you. And this is something that people find very difficult in the early days. And the first module of our Ultimate Guide to Freelancing is literally like a formula of how to do this. It's 7 questions that you go through, and we work through all the answers of how to build this proposition. But ultimately, to be really successful, and this is like, if you nail this bit, like, you are already putting yourself above 90-95% of freelancers. And to put this into context, I probably get 10 to 20 pitches a day to me. So I have 10 to 20 businesses and freelancers pitch me every working day, a little bit quieter on the weekend. And they're almost always, without fail, telling me what they can do. And what that means is I have to either have already identified the problem that I want to solve, or that I have to engage with it on quite a complex level and really read it and get to understand it before I'm even vaguely interested. And it means that what ends up happening is I don't even read most of them, because it's too much effort to go through all of these questions and through all of these pitches and what they're talking about. I don't have the time to do all of that. The ones that I do read and do reply to are the ones that start being way more personal, but I'll get to that in a second. They're talking to me and they clearly understand my business and they're not stock. But two, and I think this is important for the point that I'm making now, they clearly identify a problem that I have. So even when it comes to really boring problems, I say boring, I like doing accounting, but most people find it boring. When it comes to things like accounting, people who pitch me telling me all about their accounting services, it's not so interesting to me. But if you come to me and you say, I know that it probably takes you this long to do this specific thing, and it's something you want to make shorter, and this is how I make that specific thing take less time, then suddenly it becomes significantly more interesting. So first module that we talk about in this course is all about how to build that proposition. I'm happy to answer questions for it, but again, go and check out the workshop that we're doing later on this week to get a proper introduction to that. But fundamentally, the key point here is understanding what you do as a problem solution. So when somebody asks you what you do, your answer in that first 100 days, the answer that you're trying to develop is not to say, I'm a copywriter. It's to say, I help clients articulate their message more clearly through engaging copy on newsletters. And so you're never the subject of your own proposition, which I think is always an odd thing for people to come to terms with. But as a business, you're not the subject of your own transaction. When you buy something, you're not the subject of the thing that's being bought. It's the thing that you're buying, right? Sorry, it's the person that's buying the thing. They're the person that you're trying to engage and get interested. And the other thing I think this leads on to is a big thing in social media. I'll get to the cold pitching point, because I think that's a really good point. Social media. So when I've noticed this a lot, particularly in creative freelancers, and particularly on Instagram, although it reigns true of websites and portfolios too, which is that there's your kind of intuition when you start building social media presences, start building portfolios, is to show off your skills. And that makes sense. When you think about it, it's what should I be showing off? I should be showing off how sick I am at my particular profession. Honestly, that couldn't be more wrong of a way to go about it. And it's basically because, if your Instagram is the sickest design Instagram, let's say you're an architect, it is all of the coolest architectural design work that you've ever done, and you love it, and you're starting to get a real following of architects who love it, and everybody thinks it's a really cool, engaging page. Doesn't matter, because the people that you're trying to engage are commercial building investment people who want architects to come and build interesting buildings, who don't care that you have 10,000 other architects following you, who don't care that it looks really beautiful because they don't really understand or appreciate why it's beautiful, and they just think it looks kind of cool. If you want your social media to work for you in getting a job, you should be showing how you took a really cool brief and turned it into something creative, which is often why I say to people that Instagram isn't as beneficial as people often assume that it is. And this is why I'm going to kind of move on to this cold pitching and how to reach out to people in other places, is that when you present yourself, you can be doing one of a few things. But if your aim is to build a successful freelance career, you should be presenting information that makes you an authority or an expert in the industry, thinking about the people that you're going to be pitching to. And this again comes really clearly back to this idea that you're pitching yourself as a business, not as an architect. You're pitching yourself to people who need to hire an architect, not other architects. And so you have to start thinking about how you build your proposition, your problem solution, and how you present that on various social medias, and whether it's in your portfolio or your website. And this again then comes to where you're putting your time. So if you're going to do 1 or 2 activities a day to really nail down pitching to clients, or really nail down building your successful business, maybe those 2 actions are not to do with Instagram. Maybe those 2 actions as a group to do with your portfolio and how you present that to clients. And a big part of what we did in building Underpinned was make portfolios really easy to make. So we made these 1-page website builders, because a lot of freelancers have a website with lots of information. When you're talking to a client, you really want to send them something a lot more specific. So we really focused on that. Cool. Unless anyone, sorry, I've got a terrible cold, so I keep sniffling. Unless anybody's got any like specific question on that, I'm more than happy to talk about the problem solution thing in more detail. I was going to move on to kind of finding clients.
Yeah, Albert, I think Danny said, how can you translate that problem solution to cold pitching editors? We have quite a few, I guess, freelance writers here, which is then an interesting approach to that. But I just want to say that I totally agree. We usually have to, even when we're posting on Instagram or on social media, instead of thinking like about you, it's about thinking about the person, right? So instead of saying, I do this, it's like, when you like, this is what I can do for you. Like, it's really being clear about what you can offer, which comes a lot to, it does help when you flip that on its head. And if you're not exactly sure about your USP, a good thing to do is either ask a bunch of people you work with or some friends, or offer like 3 slots of, free consultation on whatever it is that you do, or like, I'm happy to talk to 3 people about writing as a freelancer or doing this or that, and then see what they say about the session, like what helped them, what was the biggest benefit that they took away from that conversation. And that will, one, help you strengthen your USP to yourself, but also they will have you in their mind as someone who knows what they're talking about on that specific team. So sometimes networking is also about offering something to someone else before, incorporating that to yourself. But here you go. And just everyone, just so you know, I have released the hosting thing, so you can all unmute yourself. So if you want to actually ask the questions live, please do that. And Luna asked, what is USP? It's unique selling point. Sorry. So that's your main differential. Like, what is different between you and everyone else that does something that you do, essentially. Okay, so back to the question. How can you translate that problem solution to cold pitching editors?
Sorry, I was blocked. I couldn't unmute myself. So and this comes back to our course. So just a quick point, like the first module of our course, it's all about these 7 questions, which is, what do you do? What are your goals? What problem do you solve? Who do you solve that problem for? What is your solution? Why are you the person to solve it? And what is your proposition as a whole? And like, if you get through answering all those questions, you're in a position where you can confidently and comfortably say to anyone that asks you what you do, exactly what you do really clearly. So when a client comes to talk to you, you can articulate it really clearly. The second part of the course, which is like exactly what this question is. Okay, fantastic. I get my proposition, but like, how do I turn that into something that I communicate effectively with people? Like, I understand my problem solution. I understand that my craft is a tool to achieve something for a client, and I can articulate what that is, and I can be clear about that. Fantastic. How do I then turn that into something that's going to get me work? And there's loads of different formats for this. But the first thing that we look at in the course is about portfolios. So as I said earlier, like, one of the problems or mistakes that people make is having this kind of like body of work, a load of stuff that represents them as a freelancer. It tends to be Instagram or a website or some really long, like 10, 20 page portfolio. This is the bit where we tend to talk about, and in the course, we go into a lot of detail about how to build an effective portfolio. I'll give you kind of a few of the bits from the course. The first bit, which I think is probably the most important, and this is like particularly true when cold pitching to editors, which is what I call the 10-second rule. And this applies to any profession. In fact, it applies to pretty much anything in your whole life, even if you're trying to get a birthday present out of your mum. Like the 10-second rule. You present an opportunity, a proposition to someone, all right? That first 10 seconds got to hit home. Like, if it doesn't, then they're out. Most people, when they pick up a document, and you'll have done this, and like a good example of this, like, have you ever read an article? I'm assuming everybody has read an article online or in a printed newspaper, although less likely to have done that recently. When you read that article, you start reading it. You maybe get 3-4 sentences, maybe 5 sentences in. If you're a really avid reader, maybe you finish the whole first paragraph and you get kind of 6-7 sentences in. And you go, I'm going to continue reading this, or I'm not going to bother continue reading this. And that is the key to like how to pitch effectively. Because people have this habit, this kind of this intuitive response that they should put in as much good work as possible. And again, it's the absolute opposite that you should do, because when you're pitching to somebody, by and large, you've got to kind of work on the assumption that they don't care. I know that sounds really horrible, but even if they know you and like you, you're probably not their number one priority, especially when it comes to work and when it comes to business. If you're cold pitching, you're definitely not their priority. They don't know who you are. They don't even have a context to care about you. So assuming that somebody is going to dig around in a long email or dig around in a long portfolio to find a reason to hire you is bonkers, and it just doesn't work. And if you send a portfolio, if you send a 2-page portfolio, it still probably isn't going to be completely looked at, if I'm completely honest. So the way that I would describe this is the 10-second rule. And this is like one of the core parts of our second module of our course, which is how do you grab someone's attention in the first 10 seconds? And the way that I always describe this is, if you send somebody something, you have 10 seconds to open a discussion. If you get past that 10 seconds, then you're in negotiation mode. Then you're in connection building mode. Then you're in like, I can draw some real value out of this. If you don't get past the first 10 seconds, you're wasting your time. Nothing's going to come out of it. So when you're cold pitching, there's probably like 2 stages to a cold pitch. There's like the initial message, and then there's like the thing that you attach to that message, which is like your sample. And the 10-second rule reigns true for both of those bits of information. So when you send them an email, like one thing that, oh my God, does it annoy people, is like the niceties of the beginning of an email. Do not start your emails with, it must be a strange time for your business during COVID and all of this stuff. I hope this finds you well. How have you been? I know you don't care. You know you don't care. Don't ask me. Like, we're not friends yet. There's no context for us to have that conversation. And it honestly is just annoying. So I find that like, I often will just skip past the first half of an email because the first half of an email is just them trying to be polite, which is annoying if I've only got 10 seconds to look at an email. Now, that doesn't mean that you jump in with going, let me sell you some shit, because that's equally bad. But you kind of need to find a happy middle ground where you're being polite and personal and engaging, but you're still focusing on what's important. And if you manage to fit that into 3 or 4 lines, then you're way more likely to get a response than you are if you write a 10-line email. Honestly, you write me a 10-line email, I'm not reading it. Like, I might pick out a few key words. If you've got something in bold, maybe I'll read that. I might read the first sentence. But the truth is, like, I'm not going to spend much time looking at it. So there's the email and there's the portfolio. So we have the proposition. Okay, we're clear on the proposition. Hopefully, if you've done that exercise really well and you've got the problem solution really clear and you've nailed it down to 2 sentences, the next step should be fairly easy. Somewhere in this email, I've got to include those 2 sentences. That should be fairly straightforward. Now, maybe I don't want to include those 2 sentences as the very first thing because it's a little bit intense. So maybe the very first thing that I want to say to them is, hey, I am showing you that I know who your business is and that I'm a genuinely interested fan of your business. Now, we can all play with how genuinely interested we are, but ultimately, you send me an email that says, hey, Albert, I'm a huge fan of Underpinned. My God, you're the best company ever. I saw that course that you released. It was so helpful. I know so many people that got so much out of it. God damn, you guys are good. By the way, I'm a graphic designer and I noticed that you're always doing illustrations in your magazine. You're looking to engage with the millennial audiences. It's an audience that I specialize in and I have a really interesting style that really engages that audience. I'd love to have a chat. Anyway, here's my portfolio. I'd love to stay in touch because as I said, I'm a massive fan of it. You send me that email, I'm going to read it. Like, you're going to get people more engaged if you approach it like that. Now, obviously, don't write like a complete twat like I just said. But the point is, like, you want to get people at the beginning of their email going, this person is genuinely interested in my company. And they've really clearly outlined how they could solve a problem for my company, which shows 2 things. They know and like my company, and they understand the context of my company, and they've outlined that they understand how to solve a particular context of my company. Okay, it was clear, it was to the point, maybe I'm not interested in hiring them. But the moment I go, oh, I need a graphic designer to do illustrations, that person's already in my head because I've just literally read an email from them. When it comes to your portfolio, exactly the same thing. So when we built our portfolio builder, the most important thing about our portfolio builder was that you could easily duplicate portfolios. And the reason for this is very simple. Do not have one stock portfolio that you use for everyone. You're just shooting yourself in the foot and you're saving yourself time, but you're also just going to get a way lower hit rate. if you create a portfolio that's around a specific problem solution, and I'm not going to go in today to how you might have multiple problem solutions, and we talk about this a lot in the course, but let's take you have one for now. You create a portfolio for a specific industry around a specific problem solution. That first 10 seconds, you should be changing it each time you send it to a different client. And you might just be changing 2 words. You might just be changing the image slightly. You might just be changing the particular article that you're giving as an example. Like, you might be changing the thing that you're referring to, but ultimately, the first 10 seconds, the more relevant you make it, the better. So if in that first 10 seconds, you literally put, I noticed that Underpinned used a lot of X. So I'm giving you an example of X to show how I'm really interested in X. And this is how X can help you solve Y problem. Suddenly I'm going, wow, this person actually has put time and effort. You haven't put any time and effort. This is taking you 2 minutes to do. But it's shown that you care and are interested in what's going on. And it makes me think that you really understand what you're doing. Now, the final point on cold pitching, and I realize we're not got a huge amount of time left. Isabel, just tell me to shut up whenever, because I know that I ramble on. But the final point about cold pitching is you can nail both of those 2 bits and you won't get responses. People won't reply to you. And people reply to you saying, I'm not interested. That is totally okay. And it's going to happen to you all the time. The key thing here is if you don't get a response, send 1 follow-up. Don't send more than 1 follow-up. It's just annoying. If I haven't replied to you after 1 follow-up, I'm not replying to you. Send 1 follow-up, be polite, ask for feedback in that follow-up. Don't try and push for another meeting. So if you don't say, hey, I just wanted to bump you up to the top of your mailbox to see if you're interested in this proposition that you're clearly not interested in. Instead say, hey, I just wanted to touch base on my previous email. Understand I might not be right for you now. Really keen to hear any feedback, even if it's just 1 sentence. To which maybe you get the reply, not looking to hire graphic designers at the moment. You go, oh, that makes sense. Or you get the reply, work didn't quite fit with our plans. Okay, they're looking at some other things. Or you get the reply wasn't really clear what you were selling. Oh, clearly there's a bit of a problem there. If people say no, same thing. If somebody comes back to you with no, just say a really polite, really short email. Absolutely understand, hope you can keep your mind for the future. Do you have any feedback? It's always really helpful. And it might just be, again, just 1 sentence is enough. And starting to build that to refine how you do cold outreach is by far the best way of building your cold outreach. But the final point is this, and this is probably the most important point with cold outreach particularly. So we identified that the most important characteristic of a successful freelancer was their professional network building. And that might be mostly it was through cold outreach actually, but it was through a number of different formats of outreach. Now, most people, especially when they send me messages on LinkedIn, which kills me, but most people, when they send me messages, are immediately trying to sell me something right now. There are so few businesses that you will catch right at the time that they want to buy specifically the thing that you're selling, now from you. It just doesn't happen very often. And if you stick like that, you'll just be constantly disappointed that people don't buy your service. But let's say you're an illustrator, okay, and you're pitching to a magazine that seems to produce loads of illustrations. Maybe they've already got a batch of illustrators. They're not going to and you're probably not the only person that's replying to them. You don't want to assume that you're pitching something really specific. Now, it's slightly different when you're pitching to editors specific articles, and you should reach out to me and my business partner. My business partner is an experienced editor. He's the guy to talk to about this, and he'll give you loads of insight. But the key thing is, if you're pitching something specific, still keep it open-ended enough to be I'm really interested in working with your company. If this isn't the right thing, I'm still keen to have a conversation. But the pitch is still that first 10 seconds super clear. This is what I'm thinking would be interesting for your audience because I understand the problem you're trying to solve, which is engaging these kinds of people. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is build a professional network. If you want to be successful in that first 100 days, even if you don't do our course and you don't refine your messaging, you don't really work out your business stuff, you send 2-5 messages a day that are actually thought out, personalized, and written to companies that you're genuinely interested in or people that you're genuinely interested in connecting with, and you get 10% reply, and you did 5, so you've done 500 of those messages in the first 100 days, you get 10% reply, you now have 50 people that you're connected with in 100 days. Now, if you're a successful freelancer, the guys that earn 100 to 200K a year as a solo freelancer tend to have 5 to 10 clients a year. So 50 is suddenly a really big pool of people for your first less than third of a year of work to start building a successful freelance business. Even if you fuck up every other part of business building activities and you have a terrible problem solution and a terrible format for communication, over the course of those 500 messages, you will start to refine that. And the more effort and time you put into it, the better it will be. So, to summarize, first point, like 100%, the thing you need to achieve in the first 100 days of freelancing, again, whether that's your first 100 days or the first 100 days of your 10th year, is to start thinking about yourself as a business and stop thinking about yourself as a profession. The second part is working out how to articulate your problem solution really, really clearly. And that means starting to put the client as the focus of the sentence where you describe what you do and not yourself. The third part is turning that into a clear and short format for communication to potential clients where there's a lot of other stuff to focus on, but to pick out one thing that's important, the first 10 seconds are powerful. And then third is when you're doing outreach, think about it in a slightly more, think about it as an ongoing business building activity rather than a series of individual pitches, and you'll start to be significantly better at it. Now, obviously, we've only got 45 minutes, so you can't go into massive detail and everything, but if you're interested in learning more or doing our course, as I said, there's a discount for people that come from Highlight Networking. I think it's £50 off. So it's 100, as opposed to 149, I think it's 99. But message me directly if you want to hear more about it, or message anyone in the team. I'm more than happy to talk to you, talk through it with you, and talk about what you get out of the course, because it's a really cool thing that we built. But ultimately, like, whatever you do, if you can start to, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, do that, start building your business in that way, start articulating yourself in that way, you are going to improve. And our course launches on the 1st of February, and I think the deadline for buying it is next week, but I'll have to check that. But yeah, get in touch if you're interested. That's the kind of, I think that's a pretty good summary of a good thing to set out in the first 100 days. Isabel, I'm going to shut up. I want to just keep talking.
No, that's 100% takes over. That was really useful. I saw lots of people making notes. I think just to give some more resources to what you said, we also have a networking guide. So it's how to reach out to like 10 people with intention in 7 days. So you can get that on our Instagram, and it's on guides. So it's one of the icons that look like a little book. And as Albert says, like, networking is key, and intentional networking is the way to go. And it is something that, as freelancers, the one thing that you all have to develop or have is good time management. So in whatever form that is, if it's blocking 2 hours a week to do that every week on the same day, having an Excel spreadsheet, tracking contacts through whatever, in some way. I like to manage all my life in one inbox. So I have like all these tools like snooze buttons, this and flags and alerts. So I treat my inbox as if it was like a desk, and the emails are the papers on the desk, and I don't shelve anything until it's resolved, basically. But that's my own approach to things.
I do exactly the same thing.
Yeah. People use Monday, Trello. There's all sorts of ways that you can get organized. But I think, you have to work on it consistently. Things that just show up because you're great or you're amazing at what you do. We all believe that you have potential, but it's exactly as Albert says, it's about the other person more than what you do usually. We also have a few online networking events. If anyone wants to come pitch themselves and practice their elevator pitch, we have one for the music industry and one for general creatives. And it's really fun. It's like a speed dating session as well, alongside some other things. But yes, thank you so much, Albert, for all of that. If anyone has any more questions or wants to reach out, again, get in touch with us or get in touch with Albert and Jack and sign up to our newsletters. Get involved with Underpinned. They also have an amazing job board, and they post, obviously, lots of freelancing opportunities. We also post some, but ours is more not always freelancing stuff. And please start putting into practice everything that you learned today. So go and reach out to one of the amazing people that are on this chat today. Say hi, exchange things, see if you can both review each other pitches, any of those things. That's a really great way to work. Like, sometimes your colleagues and your peers are your best mentors and your best like support system to get ahead in the industry. And I think that's it. And please join the course. As Albert said, it's going to be amazing. And if you have any other questions, I guess you all know where to find us.
Yeah, and if you want to just sign up to Underpinned, it's free, and you can check out the course before actually buying it or jumping in, and you can use all the tools for free. And I need to remember, are you going to send an email around? Because
yes.
If anyone buys the course, I want to make sure they have your code so they can get 50%.
Yeah. I'll send it on the email as soon as this is over.
Perfect.
Amazing. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. I hope you have an amazing rest.
Yes, it was recorded as well.
Yes, all of that.
Thank you, guys.
Amazing.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.